the opposition voice. It is Shashi Tharoor, who's Member of Parliament of the Congress, who's joining me on the telecast right now. Thank you so much for joining us. And my first question to you, sir, would be, should Waqf Board continue to have powers to claim property?
Well, look, the Waqf Board issue is a more complicated one than very specifically about one property or another. From our point of view, there are some real concerns about why the government is interfering, particularly interfering in the affairs of one particular religion. It's something that this government has tended to relish doing. And there are some very, very sincere concerns about this on the part of the general public, because for the opposition, it's not the business of the government to be worrying about how religious affairs are administered. And for the most part, getting the collector, for example, into making decisions about what's Waqf property or not is not the collector's business. This is charity given by Muslims to their own religious bodies. Secondly, there's some real concerns about federalism. In any case under our constitution, these are issues that should be dealt with in many cases by the states. Third, where there are disputes, as your question implies it could be, when there are disputes, you have a judiciary to deal with it. Why do we now have to empower a district collector with powers over this particular body that the collector doesn't have over similar bodies of other religions? There's a whole question about why when you don't, for example, have a non-Hindu on the Devaswam boards in my state that oversee temples, while you can have non-Muslims in the council that oversees Waqf. So these are all questions that are very legitimately raised. And then you can have also constitutional legal questions about whether the freedom of religion enshrined in Articles 25 to 30 of the Constitution would not be affected if the government starts telling Muslims how to organize themselves in this manner.
Okay, now, stating one specific example. Now, one of the Waqf courts had recently ruled the Burhanpur fort to be Waqf property. The High Court then intervened and asked if Waqf should also claim the Taj Mahal as Waqf property. In this particular case, do you think the Waqf Board misused its powers?
Look, I mean, I am not going to pronounce myself on any individual case without studying it in detail, which I have not had the opportunity to do. But I will say that where there are problems, indeed, we should let the courts come up with a conclusion, and the court conclusion will not be affected one way or the other by whether this law has been amended again or not. No, I mean, I don't see why this particular bill was necessary. If there are problems that the courts are dealing with, let them deal with it.
Do you in principle agree that there is a need for reform in Waqf Act, even if in practice you have disagreement with the proposed changes?
No, I'm not sure it's necessary. We've done a lot of amendments as recently as 2013. There normally needs to be a series of cases or other problems that indicate that the law was inadequate. Those earlier amendments made to the 1995 Act have relatively brought it up to date in practice. And to the best of my knowledge, there have been no major complaints. And if there are complaints beyond those of individual disputes, which of course should be settled in the courts, I don't know, because there's certainly been very little out there, and you can do a Google and confirm to me if you like, that would suggest that the general public or the Muslim community at large or whoever has been saying that this law is manifestly inadequate. In fact, one of the things that mystified many of the MPs who know the subject well is why on earth this bill was necessary in the first place. What crisis had warranted the government spending its time and effort to come up with such a bill?
Now, one of the issues that you mentioned with the proposed amendment is the inclusion of non-Muslims in the Waqf Board. What other issues, glaring problems within them do you see in the proposed amendment made by the government?
Well, as I've said, first of all, we are concerned about the violation of secularism, about the rights of individuals as enshrined in the Constitution to freely profess, practice, and propagate their own religion, to establish and maintain institutions of their own religion for both religious and charitable purposes, and of course about the far-reaching powers that are sought to be given to the district collector over the affairs of one religion. On top of that, there is a fact that it's suddenly going to put very explicitly two non-Muslims into a body that oversees the work of a purely Muslim charitable organization. Not clear why, and whether there is any equivalent for that in any other faith. And then finally, there is this whole business of even in some cases, the collector supplanting the judiciary. So there's a whole bunch of questions. I should have said that, of course, there's also perhaps by comparison with these big issues, a fairly small one, but still, under Article 30, a religious minority can establish and administer its own educational institutions, and many of these Waqf boards run madrasas. Now, suddenly the collector decides that a Waqf property is actually government property and not the Waqf's. Is government suddenly going to be denying the Muslim community the right to run a madrasa? Or worse still, is the government going to be in the business of running madrasas? All of this doesn't seem to have been thought through. Anyway, as you know, they're going to refer the entire matter to a parliamentary committee. And it'll be good to have the views of a whole cross-section of MPs of very different parties in different parts of the country who can air their views that the government will then have to take into consideration before bringing the bill back to the main parliament.
Okay, you've spoken about the madrasas and taking a look at the larger picture. Do you think Muslim institutions like the madrasas, the marriage laws, the Waqf board require modernization and reform?
Now, that's a wholly different issue. We certainly would agree that there are improvements that can be made. For example, when it comes to the madrasas, when I was in the education ministry, we were offering support from the central government to modernize their courses, introduce science, introduce mathematics, introduce subjects beyond religious instruction as part of the madrasa curriculum. That sort of thing is a kind of reform that I think would be without encroaching on the right of the Muslim minority to have madrasas, to make sure that the madrasas are teaching skills and knowledge that will be useful to the kids when they come out of school, beyond just knowing the religious texts and principles. Now, that kind of reform I don't see would affect anybody's interest. I don't even see any objections from the Muslim community if the government were to support in this manner.
Now, according to you, which body group of individuals would be best representative of the voice of the Muslims in matters such as these?
I am not going to go into that, because if I start as a non-Muslim giving certificates to who's the best representative of the Muslims, I'd be very presumptuous indeed.
And do you think that the Congress party is best articulating the voice of Indian Muslims on Waqf, the Uniform Civil Code and other issues in the parliament?
No, we are there to represent the interests of Indians. We are not there to represent any one particular community. But to us, the very term Indians include all communities, including Muslims. We don't understand why, for this government, it is necessary to single out Muslims time after time on various issues. For example, sadly, there are many men of many communities who desert their wives and don't pay them support, don't pay them alimony, and so on. Why is it that only Muslim desertion is now criminalized, whereas other people of other religions abandoning their wives and not giving them support is merely a civil problem? There's another example where this whole government's legislative attitude has been fairly blatantly discriminatory. Similarly, CAA. Why is it that every religion is exempt from the every religion is included in the benefits of CAA, let's put it that way, and the only community exempt is the Muslim community? There's this particular, I would say, almost viciousness to the government's bitter rejection of Muslims as first-class citizens of India, which is unacceptable to us and to many other secular parties in the India bloc. We feel that the whole logic of India is that all communities and all religions should be treated alike. And to my mind, that's what this government is sadly failing to do in many of its actions.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.